know there had to be like some type of moment where you just knew, like, man, I'm tough, I'm gritty.
Hmm. Well, that's a good point. So my wife and I, we flipped some houses. And I say we flipped one and one flipped us.
I'm
You know what I mean?
gonna use that.
Yeah, yeah. And so one of my friends, he said, it's the old saying, like everybody has a plan until they get socked in the mouth, so to
Mhm.
speak. And I'm a Christian, and even in the Bible, man, there's plenty of examples where God really didn't start to use men until they've been really humbled.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying? And once you've kind of walked through the fiery furnace, or you've been in the lion's den and you're still alive, you're like, bro, it can't get any worse.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So when we flipped that house, or I should say that house flipped us, it was a very tough situation. But my wife stayed by my side. She encouraged me. She supported me, and we worked our way through that. And then to me, now it's like, well, it can't get any worse. What do you got to do? Like, take my house, take my cars, take my family. Like,
Mhm.
let's go. So I think once you go through an experience where you just realize it's as bad as it's probably ever going to be, well, then you can't go down from there. You can only go up. And you start to play with this, like, when you have nothing to lose mentality. I do think that's part. I would say to the viewers that one thing is hard to teach is that sometimes when you don't have anything, that's a great spot to be in, because you can play with this fierceness. You know what I'm saying?
I agree.
Because you're like, hey, if I throw the Hail Mary and lose, we're a 14-point underdog anyways.
Hmm.
But if we throw a Hail Mary and win, like Illinois, they just beat Wisconsin on that last second field goal. If that kid misses, so what?
Right.
They're supposed to lose. But if he makes it,
It's a champion.
there you go.
Exactly.
I originally started this show to cater to the youth that I once was. While growing up, I didn't have many resources. All I knew is what I saw. I saw drug dealers, pimps, entertainers, athletes. That was all that I saw and all that I looked up to. So that's pretty much all that I wanted to become. All that I knew to become. This show will change that for the upcoming youth. I want for them to be able to see all of the amazing possibilities of what they can become. Not only what they can become, but also to hear it firsthand from someone in the trenches of becoming. I want to give them a window into the life of the powerful people in the world, to let them know that they are not alone and that they are powerful too. In order to accomplish this, we must be brutally honest about our hardships and upsides. We are all just a network of relations. We have to be able to relate to each other. It helps us understand that anything is possible. The life that God has for us is in our imagination. It's not in what we see. Shall we begin?
First, I wanted to thank you for getting on the show, and it's gonna be awesome. So,
Yeah.
I've been knowing Brent for
Long time.
a little over a
Since-
decade, man.
Since Keon and Preston.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I asked Brent last month if we could do a show together, and I wasn't really sure how I wanted to engage the listeners, the viewers. So I asked Brent if he had some ideas, and he said, "Have you ever read the book Grit?" And I said no. So I went out and read the book Grit, and it changed my mind and my life forever. I love it. And that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to play my questions off of the book that we read, Grit. Grit by Angela Duckworth. All right, so look.
All right, let's do it.
You ready to grit it out?
Yeah.
All right, so the author has her definition of what grit is. I have my definition. Everybody has a different definition. What does grit mean to you?
So that's a great question. I had a hunch you might ask me that, but grit to me is, I use a lot of analogies, and to me it's like Rocky IV, where, just against all odds, just doing whatever it takes to get the job done, not making excuses, not playing to your weaknesses, nothing of that nature. It's just like Rocky Balboa saying, you know what, I need to go back to Siberia, and Ivan Drago can train in this great facility with the most resources and the most talent and the most money. And man, you just put me in a barn with a pile of rocks and a wagon and a fire, and I'm gonna do it.
Great.
So does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Or is that like too simple?
No, I think everything simplified is better anyway.
Mhm.
Less is always more.
I think that's my point. Is like one message I want to get out to people is, you know, it doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter what kind of education level you have. It doesn't matter what resources you have at your fingertips. That if you have a can-do attitude, that's not if I can do it, but how I can do it. I think we live in the greatest country of all, and it can be done. Now, it might be harder for us than it might be for somebody else with a lot more resources. But, you know, the millionaire next door says that 97% of millionaires in America are first generation rich. So dad didn't give them anything, grandpa didn't give them anything. It's like they figured it out on their own.
Absolutely. I agree with you. That's something that we need to work on teaching them.
Mm-hmm.
At this point in your life,
Mm-hmm.
do you feel that you're gritty?
Yeah, so that's another good question. I'm getting my grit back, if that makes sense. I went through a season where after you have kind of gone through tough seasons and you've maybe kind of done better than you expected or whatever, I lost my edge a little bit, to be honest with you. Again, going back to Rocky IV, it's almost like where Rocky was, I heard my best friend say it this weekend, like a heavyweight boxer sleeping in silk sheets. You know, it's like he wasn't in Philadelphia like pounding on the meat in the meat locker. You know, he was living in this big mansion, driving fancy cars, and he kind of lost that grit. So how gritty am I now? I'm getting back to a new level of grit, which is neat. And one thing I'm doing to do that is I'm surrounding myself by people like you and other people who won't allow mediocrity, that won't allow like cruise control, so to speak. Because I do think that there is some level of, okay, I've done well, you know, I've got a nice house, got a nice family, go to a good church, drive vehicles that run, you know, kind of, okay, cruise control.
Right.
But the question is that all there is? And if you're not surrounding yourself with people that kind of don't let that be the end result, you can become not great.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. So you say you're getting your grit back.
Yes.
Tell me when you knew you had grit,
Mm-hmm.
and versus when you knew you lost it.
I don't know if I ever knew like when I had grit, because it's just kind of, that's how you're brought up. You know what I mean? Like my dad was one of those guys that like, I'll never forget. He was on a whitewater rafting trip with us as a family, and he broke his ankle in West Virginia, but yet he drove all the way back as a family to Ohio and then went to see the doctor. So like to me, you know, and he's a Marine, my grandfather's a Marine, my great-grandfather was a Marine. It was just always this toughness mentality, you know? So I don't think I woke up one day and go, oh, I have grit. It's just kind of all I ever knew. But one way I knew I had started to lose it a little bit was on Facebook. I think Facebook could be good and bad, depending on how you use it. But I try to friend people that are better than me at things. So even if you go through my friends list, you'll see quite a few people that are into bodybuilding. And that challenges me, right? Because, and so if I see myself, I don't get jealous of other people. You know, if somebody's a better insurance agent than I am, or a better father than I am, or a person who pays more attention to their nutrition than I do, I don't get jealous of them. I think, how can I elevate my game to do better in that realm? So that's how I knew I had lost some of my grit, when I saw people in my age group that were doing better in different areas, and I thought to myself, I have that potential, so why am I not achieving that potential?
See, that's where we lose a lot of people, because majority of the people that are on social media, they're just watching it and they beat themselves up instead of using it as a beacon to do better. I know there had to be like some type of moment where you just knew, like, man, I'm tough, I'm gritty.
Well, that's a good point. So my wife and I, we flipped some houses. And I say we flipped one and one flipped us. You know what I mean?
I'm going to use that.
Yeah. And so one of my friends, he said, you know, it's the old saying, like, everybody has a plan until they get socked in the mouth, so to speak. And, you know, I'm a Christian, and even in the Bible, man, there's plenty of examples where God really didn't start to use men until they've been really humbled. You know what I'm saying? And once you've kind of walked through the fiery furnace, or you've been in the lion's den and you're still alive, you're like, bro, it can't get any worse.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So when we flipped that house, or I should say that house flipped us, it was a very tough situation. But, you know, my wife stayed by my side. She encouraged me. She supported me. And we worked our way through that. And then to me, now it's like, well, it can't get any worse. What do you got to do? Like, take my house, take my cars, take my family. Like, let's go. So I think once you go through an experience where you just realize it's as bad as it's probably ever going to be, well, then you can't go down from there. You can only go up. And you start to play with this, like, when you have nothing to lose mentality. I do think that's part. I would say to the viewers that one thing is hard to teach is that sometimes when you don't have anything, that's a great spot to be in, because you can play with this fierceness. You know what I'm saying?
I agree.
Because you're like, hey, if I throw the Hail Mary and lose, we're a 14-point underdog anyways. But if we throw a Hail Mary and win, like Illinois, they just beat Wisconsin on that last second field goal. If that kid misses, so what?
Right.
They're supposed to lose. But if he makes it,
he's a champion.
There you go.
Exactly.
So playing to win, not playing to lose. And not just about money, man. I'm talking about, like, life, with your kids, you know, with your spouse, with friendships.
You mentioned that it's kind of been inside of you since you were a kid. So that makes me wonder what your childhood was like. What was it like growing up?
Yeah, so I grew up in Lima, Ohio. I love Lima. A lot of.
Ohio too.
Are you? Where at?
Canton, Ohio.
I didn't know that.
Yep.
But it, you know, it just you know, we grew up working hard all day long. You know, it's like you work hard, you go home and have a hot shower and a good meal. You go to bed and you do it again, you know. But I would say that I didn't have very good mental toughness. You know what I mean? And that's part of grit too, is having mental toughness. And so I had good work habits as a kid, but like I didn't have the mentality that like I couldn't fail. I was scared of failing. You know? So there are different levels of grit, you know? So now what I would say is I have the mentality of I still have a good work ethic, but I have less fear of failing. And I'm not as gritty as I want to be, because I still do have some of that fear. You know, I still find myself at some points maybe not letting it all out there. But that's why, again, I try to surround myself with people like you and other people that I consider successful people, because I want you all to influence my mentality, not people that, like, you know, would encourage fear.
Right.
Does that make sense? So growing up, I had, since I was growing up, the work ethic, but I'm glad now to surround myself with others where I'm starting to learn. It's called like an abundance mentality versus a scarcity mentality. Because like, even if I fail, like you and I both know, if I failed right now and lost everything, we go back to work tomorrow and start all over again, right? That's the abundance mentality. The scarcity mentality is we make a mistake, we lose all now, that's it. That was our one shot and we're done. And that's just not true.
Yeah, I agree. That is something that I deal with every day, is like programming my mind to think abundant.
Correct.
Because the moment that I start thinking like I see lack in the world,
correct,
I scale back.
There you go.
And my decisions aren't they aren't aligned with my purpose.
Right. So, like, let's talk about grit. So grit can be habits and behaviors, but grit can also be mentality, right? So I think there's a lot of people, honestly, that work extremely hard and have grit in their daily like habits and work ethic, but they might not have the grit up here. If that makes sense?
Yeah.
And what I'm trying to tell you is I think I've always had the grit as far as working, but I haven't always had the grit up here. And I'm learning that as I get older and like positioning myself around men and women that challenge me to think differently. So you and I are both readers. I think the average CEO reads like 50 to 60 books a year. I don't read that many. I read like 20. But Mark Twain did say, what's the difference between a person who knows how to read and chooses not to and a person who can't read?
Wow.
Nothing.
Finished it.
Right? So what I try to do is read a lot by people that are better than me and have gone before me and have a lot of grit, like Damon John from Shark Tank, created the famous brand Fubu. Who else? Grant Cardone. I wear a bracelet right here because, again, even like with rental properties, my original goal was to have 10 rental properties by the time I retired. Grant Cardone's like 10x, man.
He's like, that's sweet.
That's just getting started, right? Yeah. So now we have more than 10, not a great deal more, but more than 10. And now, but my goal, has shifted from scarcity to abundance. So now, like, honestly, I would like us to see at least 100 doors or 100 properties. And again, I hope that we talk again and that's a lot more than that, right?
It will be.
Yeah, but at least for now, though, so there.
It gives you a bar at least to reach.
Yeah. Well, what they say at the car lot, if you're green, you're growing, and if you're ripe, you're rotten. So I'm 39 years old, and, if my goals aren't bigger and larger and more abundant and for other people too, not just myself, like next year than they are this year, have I grown? You know what I mean?
Exactly. I remember I'm not sure exactly who said it, but they said if you look back on yesterday or last year and your situation hasn't changed any, you're headed in the wrong direction.
Yeah, sure.
So when you think about that, like there's been years for me that I was like, man, I'm doing the same thing I was doing last year. I got a question for you.
Yeah.
So the mindset you said wasn't there, but the work habits were. Did you grow up with both parents?
Yeah, so my mom and dad divorced when I was 3. And so was my biological father and my biological mother in the same house? No. But I did have both parents, just not in the same home.
Gotcha.
And I did have stepfathers. But, I mean, I'll let you ask the next questions, but it is amazing. I'm the 4th of 4 boys. And kind of who you listen to and what you're taught and what you see influences a lot.
100%.
I will say, because like I can point to 2 different sides of the family, and one mentality is this self-efficacy of, hey, we might not have been given this or given that, but man, by golly, whatever we do, we can make a difference and we can change our lot in life. And then another side of the family, I'm not saying their woe is me, but it's kind of like, well, that's not who we were born to be. We're just created to be this. And it's more of like a learned hopelessness to a certain degree. Not that it's like down and out by any means, but it's kind of like, don't dream that big.
A learned hopelessness.
Yeah. And I think that's what really grit comes down to for me is this. We can talk all day long, but can you do something about your current situation? Whether it's your habits or your thought processes or who you hang around or where you invest your time, money, and energy. Or is, if you think better, you invest your time, energy, and money better, and the people you hang out with better, it doesn't matter because there's no hope of changing it. That's really what it comes down to.
Right.
In my opinion is, I think things can be changed.
That's what motivates me. And I'm reading this book right now called Stillness, and it talks about the more that you learn about the brain, it helps you persevere through things because you know that that's not a permanent circumstance whenever you have a failure.
Absolutely.
I'm working on teaching that with my kids.
Yeah.
So,
well, and I don't know if you've arrived in that, but like I work on that with myself
every day
too, right? You know, like that's the last thing I'd want to communicate to anybody right now is that like Brandt Davis has arrived by any means. Because if anything, I realize that like for me as a Christian, I'm more dependent on the Lord now than I have ever been because I realize on my own, I don't have what it takes.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I have, the more mature I've gotten, the more humble I've become. So.
That's funny that you use that saying, you haven't arrived. I'll tell you a funny story about my old GM, and I'm walking around my dealership kind of arrogant and feeling like I'm on top of the world because I could do anything, number one, and it actually cost me so much thinking that I arrived. And I never even thought about it being used as you've arrived. I never even thought to put it that way. So he sat me down and he was like, hey man, what's going on with you? Like I see you kind of slacking a little bit and I think that you got so much more in you.
Right.
He said, the problem is you think you've arrived. He said, but you forgot about the people that are doing quadruple the numbers you are.
Right.
He said, he was like, my buddy just flew me in on his private jet for the weekend.
Right.
And I was like, whoa.
Right.
I got to thinking that, like, man, I never want to arrive then.
Right. And to be honest, you said it better than I did about, you said, when did you like realize you had grit? And then when did you realize you needed more grit? There was a point in my life where I thought I had arrived. You know what I mean? But it wasn't until like seeing some guys like Gary Vaynerchuk and Grant Cardone and all these other guys on Facebook where I was like, man, really, I'm just getting started.
Yeah, absolutely.
As far as my potential, right? And I think that's what I would also say to people is grit is becoming the best you can be, you know? And like, so you sell cars, you sell 35 cars a month, right?
Right.
So if somebody's doing the best they can, and they can sell 10 cars, more power to them. And they don't need to compare themselves to you and feel less than because you're selling 35, right? But if you're selling 35 and you're sandbagging, you need to get going.
Right.
So like that's what you know what I mean? I don't want it's not about like who's been more successful or not, but my oldest son wrestles at St. X, and they have a thing on the wall. I took a picture, and it basically says, have you reached your potential today? And that's what grit means to me is, you know, I can't, you know, Grant Cardone's doing his thing, Eric Wisdom's doing his thing, you know, other people are doing his thing, but I have to look in my mirror and say, have I done the best I can today as a husband, a daddy, an individual in society, a business owner, you know, and if any time I answer that and the answer is no, like I need to go more chips in and leave more on the table. Absolutely.
So who instilled that work habit inside of you?
My dad.
Dad?
Yeah, so my dad he did work at it's the oil refinery in Lima, Ohio. But, I mean, it used to be Ohio or Standard Oil, and then it became BP, and then it was Husky. But, you know, I saw my dad work shift work. And shift work is where, you know, you might work 3 days in a row, have a day off, go back and work nights. And then work nights for a week, and then shift and become days. So, you know, 1 week he's eating lunch at 4 p.m. and then next week he's eating lunch at 4 a.m. and it just whacked his body out. But, you know, my dad, you know, I don't know if he'll see this or not, but I really mean he never complained about going to work, not one time. He's a guy who went to work when he was sick. You know, there's many times, Christmas Day, we wouldn't open presents till 6 p.m. because Dad was at work at 6 a.m. till 3 p.m. But just having that can do, not if I can, but how I can mentality, like I get that from my dad for sure.
Was it something that he said to you?
No.
You just picked up his habits.
Yeah, so Dave Ramsey, he's a guy I listen to on the radio quite a bit. He uses this saying, more is caught than is taught. And so, don't get me wrong, my dad had all these quotes and would inspire me and stuff, but like, at the end of the day, he could have told me, son, you need to be a hard worker, but like I see him sleeping in and never going to work and like calling out sick when he barely had a cough. I lost respect for my dad and wouldn't be much, but like, more is caught than is taught. So me seeing him be the man he needed to be as a worker taught me more than anything he would ever said. Because if I look at my kids and I say, hey, don't do as I do, just do as I say, how's that gonna work?
Terrible. Terrible.
Right? You know what I mean?
Smoke.
Yeah. So he, sure, all dads have these quotes and sayings and whatnot, but him just doing it.
It reminds me of this quote that says, kids don't listen to what you say.
They listen to what you do. Yeah, amen. And then Jim Tressel, one of the former coaches at Ohio State, always used to say, nobody cares about what you know until they know that you care.
100%.
You know what I'm saying? And even like I would listen to my dad about other subjects in life because I knew that like when it came to being provided for, he was never gonna drop that ball. And there's a security in that. Like, Dad, I might not like what you say, I might not like what you're telling me, but by golly, I'm never gonna miss a meal. There's always gonna be lights on. And so because of that, there's just like this certain level of respect just to at least hear the man out, even if I don't agree.
Right.
You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. Where would you put yourself, how you grew up in middle class, upper class? What would you say?
Like what class was I in?
What would you label yourself? You know how they have these classes.
Like I am now or like when I grew up?
How you grew up.
I would just say blue collar.
Blue collar.
Because that's the other thing too. No matter how bad somebody has it, whether it's me or anybody else, somebody always has it better and somebody always has it worse.
Right.
And I could say, well, man, my dad, he didn't get home till 6 p.m. on Christmas Day for me to open presents. Well, A, I had a dad coming home at 6 p.m. on Christmas Day. B, I was opening presents in a house, not at a shelter or under a bridge. So, I'm not going to sit here and act like, cry me a river. But yeah, at one point, us 4 boys were on food stamps. Because I have 3 brothers, but technically they're half brothers, so that goes into like child support issues and whatnot that we won't get into. But I just clarify that because I don't want my dad, his name never be disparaged. Like Absolutely. He was always doing what he wasn't obligated to do.
Absolutely.
But anyways, I don't know. I would say middle class, but I don't think you can be middle class on food stamps either. You know what I mean? So like technically somebody would probably say, oh, you're low class. But I will say this though, that I think there's a difference between being broke and being poor. And even when we were on food stamps, and I remember, Eric, I mean this just as solidly as I can say it. I remember like my oldest brother, Darren, getting a shirt for Christmas. And I remember being giddy thinking, man, I can't wait till he outgrows that thing and it goes through my 2 other brothers because I'm going to get to wear it. But my point was, we were never taught to be poor in mentality. Like we were always taught, like we're just working because like tomorrow's coming. And even like when we had clothes that were hand-me-downs, there's no reason those clothes couldn't be cleaned and pressed. It might not say Nike or whatever the brand, the end thing was, but like they were clean and pressed. We still had self-respect. And so Dave Ramsey says that poor is like a permanent state of mind. It goes back to that learned hopelessness. Like, man, you're poor, you can't do anything about it, you're always gonna be poor.
Right.
And broke is, I'm not where I wanna be, but man, I can do something about it, and one day I will be. And that's that self-efficacy. So like, were we poor? No. Were we broke? yeah, at some points. We ate a lot of bologna, and man, my mom, she could make
both.
Hey, let me tell you. So there's a you call it a meme? Is that what's on Facebook? So there's a meme the other day that said, "You weren't poor if you don't know what this is." Whatever. But it was like a piece of wheat bread, and it said hot dog bun. It was a piece of wheat bread, and it said garlic toast. And it was a piece of wheat bread, and it said like pizza. You know, and like, so I remember, man, you could take a loaf of wheat bread and, man, you could make all sorts of things out of that.
Yep.
So, but again, we had a loaf of wheat bread.
Yep.
Right? So I'm thankful.
I know all about that bologna, man.
Did you eat it fried or with American cheese?
I was just about to say that.
Yeah.
I actually like it fried.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is about. I think it was probably my uncles. Like, they would always cook stuff until it looked like it was dead.
Yeah. So let's talk for a minute though. Like, this is part of grit. In that, like, hey, the worst you can do to me is take everything, and I eat a lot more bologna like I used to.
Mm.
Is that bad?
No.
I love bologna. Like, I'll go eat a hot dog right now, right?
Right.
So I think that's that learned
You might
grit.
not feel good after it, man.
Right. Yeah, but my point is, it's like, you know, you realize you came from nothing, and you realize you can go back to nothing, and you're all right. Because who I am is not what I do. You know, and you can take what I do, and man, I'm still gonna be who I am.
I like
I'm
it.
just a country boy from Lima, Ohio, that likes the Ohio State Buckeyes, and I can eat with you at Jeff Ruby's, or man, we could go Golden Corral right now and be all right.
Exactly.
You know.
I like the wordage that you use. You say you grew up blue collar, because that's how it was for me. I think Ohio, they consider that a blue collar state.
Oh yeah, Rust Belt.
Exactly,
Right?
Rust Belt.
I mean, you know, Canton,
Mm-hmm.
you know, Youngstown,
Yeah.
Cleveland, Lima. I mean, so yeah. Go ahead,
Exactly.
sorry.
Yeah, my grandfather worked for Republican Steel.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like he took care of, I would say, about 5 families off of his one income.
Yeah.
And when Republic Steel started going down, it got a little tough.
Yeah.
One thing that I wanted to talk about is, you said that from what I hear, it wasn't like you grew up absolutely perfect. Everything didn't go in your favor. And you paid attention to dad's habits. One of the biggest problems that I see with our generation is they mistake their talents for grit. And I'm a victim of it. That's why the GM had to sit me down, and I had thought that my talents was everything, right? It's almost like the fable in the Bible when they say you are multiplying the talents. So the problem is, you got people think that having money and being born into status, they think that that's everything, but actually it can sometimes be a hindrance.
100%. 100%. And that's what I think you just said a lot better than I tried to say earlier, is that, like, I hope people read this book, but, you know, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, you know, Dame John, you know, if you look at most people, and I'm not talking about me, I'm not necessarily I'm talking about people that really, really done well.
Right.
Most of the time, it's because they had this fierce fire in their belly, because they didn't have something growing up. You know what I mean? So The Millionaire Next Door, that book's an excellent read for everybody. It talks about the first generation of Americans, or 97% of American millionaires are first generation rich. They say by the 3rd generation, most of the wealth is gone. So let's play that out just for a minute.
All right.
So, you know, I know people that have started construction companies. I know people that have owned car lots, you know, you name it. So let's just say somebody I know owns a construction company. All right, so Grandpa started a construction company with just one truck, going out and hammering nails, creating relationships, you know, whatever else. 2nd generation comes along, and, you know, they still run the construction company from a management standpoint, but they've never hammered the nails or done the grit, back-breaking, middle of August work.
Yeah.
So they still get to live a nice life based on Grandpa's kind of like investment that he made. And they're still working, but not in that, like, down in the trenches, know what it takes, knows what the front line kind of people do. I mean, they still know it a little bit, but not as much as Grandpa did, right? Now the 3rd generation comes along, they don't even know how to manage the company, and they surely don't do any of the first line stuff.
Right.
In fact, they might even look down on first line workers. Well, once Grandpa dies, and once Dad starts to transition out of the picture, you know, at retirement, now what? You've got people trying to run a company that have never done the work themselves, so they don't respect that level of worker, and B, that worker doesn't respect them, and C, they don't even know how to manage it. All they know how to do is take the profit from the company and go buy boats and houses. So now what?
Exactly.
I can tell you that company's not in for a bright future. So, in fact, I'm not sure if it was in this book or not, but one of the CEOs, I know what it was. It's another book I read, but this billionaire in America told his son, the one thing I can't give you, I really wish I could, is I can't give you what it feels like to not have something.
Wow.
You know what I mean? So he basically was admitting that, like, I'm putting you in a bad spot by not allowing you the chance to kind of dig out the hole, so to speak. It's almost like the butterfly and the, I guess whatever it is before the butterfly, what do you call that?
The cocoon?
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, whatever, you're talking about the sparse guy in the roof, right? What's that animal that becomes a butterfly? But the point is this, like, the journey, the caterpillar, right, coming through the cocoon is what makes the butterfly beautiful and live. But if you jeopardize that, and the caterpillar would not have to fight its way through the cocoon, I believe that the butterfly wouldn't even live.
I think that's actually probably true.
Right, so I think that's what happens all the time. And I have to be careful of that. So, again, I don't want to sit here and act like I'm rich and whatnot, because I'm really not. And as far as my potential, man, there's a lot more to do, and there's a lot more potential to give and bless others and get other people going. Right? So it's not all about me. But I do have to be careful with my own kids that, like, even if I'm not playing my cards and showing them all my hand, like, I went to Disney World one time for one day ever prior to being an adult, which again is more than a lot of people.
Right.
But my kids are 8 and 5, and we've been 4 times.
Wow.
Now, granted, we could have been.
Yeah, that's a blessing for them.
We could have been a lot more.
Let me ask you this: Do you tell them that?
Yeah,
tell
absolutely.
them how privileged?
Absolutely.
Good.
Yeah, because we are privileged and we're very blessed.
Right.
Yeah, but the Bible says to those who've been given much, much is required. And so my wife and I even have conversations in that, hey, just because we can go doesn't mean we need to go, right? And even then, not making, we shouldn't feel guilty about it at all. You know what I'm saying? But, like, how can we use that well to help others, to elevate others?
I see.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. That brings up a great topic when you mention the third generation, the wealth being gone. And that's a big thing that I have playing in the back of my head is I don't feel like I've lived to my full potential if I haven't created some type of process for my kids to evolve. That I don't feel like I deserve to be here if I'm not trying to maximize that. So that's really important, is to be able to teach your kids to teach their kids.
Yeah, amen. So there's a pastor out in Texas named Tony Evans that I listen to all the time. He's fantastic. He has a ministry called the Urban Alternative, and some people might even know his daughter Priscilla Shire, if I'm saying her name correctly. But they're both very gifted teachers. And but Tony says, based on biblical example, that a man should take care of to his third generation. So to your point, like, I'm not only considering myself, and I'm not even considering just my kids, but I'm considering my kids' kids. And the one thing I would say, though, is this. I saw a quote, another meme on Facebook, and supposedly it was, like, attributed to Bruce Lee. I think it is, but, like, you know how that goes. They might just show his picture and whatever. But I forget where I was going with that. But basically, it says, don't give your kids what you never had. Teach your kids what you never knew, or what you were never taught. And so that's one thing that I think Grit brings out to me too, is knowledge and knowledge transfer. I think too many times in America, people are thinking that, like, hey, I don't want the knowledge, I just want the end result. Well, the problem is, if you just get the end result without the knowledge, that end result will be gone in no time.
Absolutely.
So that's why you have a lot of people who win the lottery, that they're worse off 5 years after they win the lottery, because they just basically went from the caterpillar stage to this beautiful butterfly stage without the journey and the process of going through the cocoon.
They skipped it.
Yeah, so, I really, like, my kids do yard work. They work with me. They'll work in high school, because even if my wife and I do end up having some extra funds,
Mm-hmm.
we're not going to just give them that. They
Right.
need to enjoy the journey.
Mm-hmm.
But my point would be to all the viewers that, and to yourself, like if you want to make sure your kids are all right,
Mm-hmm.
the best way to do that is to make sure they have the knowledge that you have, and that knowledge is transferred to them. That way, if even the money went away, it can be duplicated or made new
Right.
through knowledge. But the problem is, if you only give them money and not the knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
if something does go wrong, even outside of their control, they won't even know where to begin to start.
Right.
Does that make sense?
That 100%. It's like the money comes and goes, but the wisdom of knowing how to get it is always there.
That's right.
So
And
technically, the money's never gone because you got a wealth of knowledge.
that's my point.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why you can see, and that's where the abundance mentality versus the scarcity mentality comes into play. Because, and so I would say that's like you say, do I tell my kids about it? My kids have a bank account, they have lemonade stands, they come to work here with me, and, they go and look at houses with me to be potential rental properties, and then they go and collect rent with me sometimes.
Nice.
And they are starting, even at a young age, to understand the value of money. That it's just not there. It's like, how does it come? And ultimately, I believe that Jesus is the provider of that to us. So then I've shown a humility and a thankfulness for even allowing me the capacity to think and do the job.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'll be the first to tell you that if we were living in a different country and under certain rule or leadership, I wouldn't have the opportunities I have today.
Absolutely. It's so important, like you said, to surround yourself around positive people or people that are doing just a little bit better than you, because a few months ago, I wouldn't had even known to put my son to work.
Mm.
And I was talking to this kid, and he grew up, really religious. His parents sheltered him properly. He's just right, in my opinion.
Yeah,
right?
none of us are just right.
Well, I'm looking at it.
I know what you're saying, though.
The opposite of me.
Yeah, but look, anytime I thought I was just right, stand back, because bad stuff's about to happen. But I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, so he told me that he has been working since he was 5 years old. And I was like, man.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been working since I was 5 years old, but it was more like hustling, selling candies, and getting books from here, books from there, trying to flip stuff. So, but I never actually had somebody to direct my hustle or guide me with work.
Mm-hmm.
So I had my son. He's about to turn 8. I took my oldest to one of the rental properties last month, and all he had to do was unscrew all of the light sockets and plugs.
Yeah, like the plates.
Yeah. Plate covers so that so we could paint, and he loved it.
Yeah, good.
He's like, when are we going back?
Sure.
What can I do next?
Sure.
And I definitely, that makes my heart warm knowing that he finds some type of gratification in hard work. And I wish that I had that direction.
Well, I think starting them young, and then again, him observing dad do it, big deal, right? It's hard for him, if you were sitting on the couch and you said, son, you go and do it. Probably not going to work so well.
Oh, he knows.
Right.
He's learning like you learn from your father by his habits. Funny story is I think it was like a Sunday. I'm just cruising down the street. We're on our way to pick up some lunch, and I see this guy out pounding, doing concrete. And I hop out. Well, I tell my son to get out. He was like, why are we getting out? And I was like, because I want to ask this guy if he can do the concrete at one of my houses. And my son's like, he's just sitting there soaking it up. And I finally get the guy to do the concrete, right? And he's at home explaining to his mom. He's like, hey, Dad hopped out of the car today. He got some guy to work for him. He said, when I get older, I want to get some people to work for me. So just understanding that, it's cool seeing them have a visual of what you're doing.
Yeah.
After you read this book, did it do, well, better said, what did it do for you? Did it define what you already had in yourself, or did you just make a decision that wasn't inside of you, and now I'm going to be gritty?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I already had grit, but it almost made me feel like, like I think a lot of times, when you grow up, I've had people say, well, like, you're not the smartest, you're not the fastest, you're not the whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And I think for one of the first times in my life, it gave me permission to say that's all right.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have to be. But through passion and endurance and perseverance, I can still win the
Mm-hmm.
race. You might beat me in 40 yards. You might beat me in 200 yards. You might beat me in 2 miles. But are you still going to be running at 20 and at 200?
Right.
You know what I mean? So it gave me freedom to know that, like, if one of the only reasons I'm successful is because of grit, well, then so be it. That's fine.
Right.
It's not because I'm the best salesman or the best anything. It's just because I'm not going to quit.
Right.
I love what I do, not just like it. I love doing it with my team. I love doing it for my customers. And, like, if you love what you do, you can do it longer and better and harder than everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't take you as long to get refreshed. Keep doing it some more.
Right.
So always love what you do. And then the other thing is, too, that I really appreciated, I didn't realize that grit could be grown.
Mm.
And honestly, Eric, that's, I think, when I started following you more on Facebook and some of these other people, where I started to realize, hey, if that's the one major thing I have is grit, how do I grow it? So my son, like I told you, he's on a wrestling team, and an opposing wrestling coach told us one time, if you're the biggest, fastest, strongest wrestler in the wrestling room, you need to go to a new wrestling room. And that, to me, I mean, doesn't that make great sense?
100%.
Yeah, so what was happening was I had kind of maybe plateaued or peaked because, I hate to say this, but like maybe in whatever circles I was in, I was like the biggest, strongest, fastest in that circle.
Mm-hmm.
And I needed to become the slowest,
Mm-hmm.
weakest, you know what I mean, in the next room up.
Absolutely.
And so that's what I did. So, when you start comparing yourself to bodybuilders, you don't go, oh man, I'm in great shape. You go, whoa, I better drink more water. I better eat better. If you start looking at Gary Vaynerchuk and Grant Cardone, you don't go, 10 properties pretty good. Like, bro.
Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, like, I need to get going.
Exactly.
So that's what I did. And then, so there's another book called Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. I think I'm saying that
I heard
right.
about that. I haven't read that
Yeah,
yet.
so this is strong. Listen to this. If your viewers take the 5 people that they hang out with most and then take the average of their weight, take the average of their income,
Mm-hmm.
I bet your viewers would be, like, basically you make the average of what your 5 closest confidants make. You weigh about the same as your 5 closest confidants.
Wow.
Because, like, you are who you hang out with. Birds of a feather flock together, and if your buddies are always eating chicken wings and pizza and drinking 2 liters of Coke, and you're doing the same thing, it's hard too, like, to differentiate oneself. It might not be hard for some people. It's hard for me.
I know some people probably at work, they probably feel like I'm like an astronaut because I'm always distancing myself from everyone. And I don't do that to be hurtful, but it's more like I kind of want to protect what I'm homing in on, because the moment that I hear some gossip that you're talking about or some negativity, it's going to lower me, and then my mind will be geared on that.
Right.
So I agree with you when you say, like, the average of the 5 people. And just think if you did the math on that. My friends, man, they're digital.
Yeah.
Because I'm watching videos,
right.
I'm reading, always trying to learn something. But I want to go back to what you said about having more can actually be less, because those kids that grow up privileged and they end up getting sheltered and they don't understand how to grit through everything. So,
That's right.
so for everybody watching, if you are in a situation and you feel like you're on the bottom of the totem pole, you're in the best position, because nobody understands more than you what it takes.
Mm-hmm.
And you have nothing to lose, but everything to gain.
I agree with that. I also think it is extremely hard to probably hear that.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's like, oh, that's really easy to say, Eric, you know, when you sell 35 cars a month and whatnot.
I'm
But
speaking for myself, though, because
Me
I grew
too.
up crappy.
me too. Well, look, I went to a birthday party a few months ago, and my son, not to be gross, but he had a hot dog and he ate like half of it and didn't want it, the other half, and he threw it out.
Mhm.
Well, like, I could see what was in the trash. It wasn't like horrible stuff. It was like popcorn and that hot dog or whatever. So I picked that hot dog up out of the trash and I ate it because I wanted a hot dog. I didn't want
Right.
to waste another one of the,
Exactly.
of the host and hostess. But my wife looked at me like, are you nuts? But I did it intentionally for multiple reasons. A, I didn't want to waste it.
Mhm.
But B, I wanted my kids to see me do it.
Right.
Because that's not the first time I've eaten stuff out of the trash. You know what I mean? And so we went to Target the other day, and they had a, what do you call those orange? A cantaloupe, right? And part of it was bruised.
Mhm.
Because of that partial bruising, they had thrown the whole cantaloupe out. So again, it was in the trash right there on top of other cantaloupe shavings. You know, I'm not talking about like disgusting trash here.
Right.
So I take it up front to the cashier, and I asked, I said, if you don't mind, I'd like this, but I don't want to buy it. You know, it was in your trash. And she said, well, let me check with, she said, let me check with my manager. And the manager came over and goes, sure, if you want it. But again, it was two reasons. A, I knew if I cut off that 10%,
Mm-hmm.
I'd have 90% good cantaloupe.
Huh.
But B, I wanted my kids to know that, like, the Davis family, we're not above, you know, we're not people who have to have 100% perfection in life.
Right.
We can take situations and work with them.
See, I always want to
Yeah.
feel like that.
So, and I really mean this. I'm really not just making this up. We went home, and my wife loved the lesson. She cut off the bruised part, sliced open the cantaloupe. I promise you, and it's not because of this experience.
Mhm.
That was one of the best cantaloupes I've ever had.
Hmm.
But my kids, what an important lesson for them to hey, we're not above doing what it needs to be done within ethical and legal
Mhm.
constraints. You know what I mean? I'm not one of these like, you know, we have to survive, so we'll do anything, even if it's not legal or ethical. That's not what I'm saying. But within legal and ethical bounds,
Mhm.
like, think outside the box.
Absolutely.
Why would you not cut 10% off of a cantaloupe and enjoy 90% of it?
Exactly.
It's free cantaloupe. It was wonderful.
It's kind of a metaphor of fruit.
There you go.
So, what are some things that you're doing inside of your mind or your daily habits to develop grit?
Good point. So, again, not to like preach, so to speak, but in my opinion, if God the Father is the one who's my provider, and I meditate and spend time with Him daily, and I know that He's always been faithful, and I've never gone without.
Mhm.
As long as I keep that connection solid, then it frees me up to make more choices that require faith.
Mm.
When I don't meditate and spend time with the Father, and then therefore I get a little arrogant and think it's all about me and the choices I make and what I'm kind of making happen, like I'm the mover and shaker for some reason, then I start to get a little bit more fearful because I don't trust myself as much. And like, I think, what if something goes wrong? And I start thinking about all the variables. So one of the things I do a lot is attend church, be in the Word, you know, and make sure that I'm in the presence of the Lord and that I'm within His will. That way I'm not afraid to like act on faith, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
That's one thing. And then another thing, and this isn't just to stroke your ego, but sincerely, is surrounding myself with people, whether it's digitally or in book or in actual, you know, physical relationship,
Right.
that make me strive to be a better person.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Because like, you and I met at Texas Roadhouse probably like 6 months ago, and you just told me about P90X,
Mhm.
and I knew I had it in me, but I just needed some encouragement. And you're like, man, just do this, this, and this. And I've lost 20 pounds since then. But had I sat there with somebody who, you know, maybe wasn't on that journey and was 50 pounds more than me, I might have been like, yeah, I'm doing pretty good. But,
Exactly.
But I want to surround myself with people that make me be a better husband, a better daddy, a better person, a better Christian. Because I think God has given us all a ton of ability and potential to accomplish eternal purposes. And like Tony Evans said, I don't want to just say, hey, one day when I stand before the Lord, like, yeah, you know, I owned a business and I owned some rental properties and I made sure my kids were at school on time and they got good grades, and then I loved my wife and she loved me and I died. Like, I don't know if that's the definition of success either. You know, I think the definition of success is, am I accomplishing here on earth what God created me and purposed me to do? You know, and I think money can be a vehicle for some of that. But, you know, if even the Bible says, if, you know, a man inherited the whole world but loses his soul, you know what I mean? Like, what is he? You know, so that's my point too. Is I know we've talked a lot about money because that's kind of how people engage, and that's kind of how this is thought of. But you know, what does grit look like if you love your kids and maybe they haven't responded very well? Do you give up loving your kids, or do you continue in this gritty way to continue to love them and pursue them and let them know that, like, you're here, and when they come back, you're ready for them?
Right.
Or what if your wife isn't real pleased with you, or something, or you have coworkers that are hard to deal with, and yeah, money's not an issue, but just relationships in general. Like, have that grit, have that endurance, surround yourself with people that make you want to be a better friend, a better spouse. Do you follow what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Name something that you've lost due to not being gritty.
Oh, that's good. Wow. Well, I'd say opportunities where, just like with flipping those houses, you know, where I bought more houses since then, and then I turned around and sold it to somebody who I know could flip it and do real well, and I definitely made a nice margin. But if I would have had a little bit more grit and maybe not had that horrible experience saying in the background, you can't do it, you can't flip, you don't have what it takes, and I would have flipped it myself, I would have had more margin.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Right.
So the opportunity cost, I've lost some, and trying to shake that. And like you said, looking forward, the windshield is bigger than the rear view mirror. But I'd be lying to you if I told you that there weren't like past voices that say, you know, you failed in this area, don't try it again.
Right.
You know, stuff like that. And I do think too, sometimes being gritty and like playing with a chip on your shoulder, sometimes it's cost me relationships with friends because, like you had even said at the car lot, you know, you're this way or that way, but like I want to make sure that like sometimes that I can be tenacious and persevere and tough in one arena, but allow that edge to be kind of smoothed off and gentle and kind with people in other areas. And sometimes it's like, I think guys like me, I won't speak for anybody else, can be so focused and so determined that it's hard to like flip the switch. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Man, I could go through a list of some things that I've lost due to not being gritty. It makes me think about.
Well, do you mind sharing one or two with me? Because it might even like help me.
Let me think.
Well, I don't want to put you on the spot. I think that's the biggest thing to this whole message is, you know, at the end of the day, when I'm on my deathbed, I never want to say, man, I shoulda, coulda, woulda.
Right.
Whether it's money or relationships or adventure. So there's a quote by William Wallace that says, all men die, but few men truly live.
Right.
I mean, I teach my sons that all the time.
I love it.
Because, you know, at the end of the day, like, just go. Just go for bandit. And somebody said the other day, like, I think we were at Longhorn over there, and it said on the wall, like, you only get one life to live, but if you live it well enough, you don't want to do it a second time. And that's my theory, is like, just let's live with abandon. And how many times by not living with grit or allowing fear, do we just squelch potential in ourselves and in other people?
When I think about the question that you just asked me, there have been times that I've been maybe too gritty, and maybe not. Maybe it wasn't that I was too gritty. It's more of me relying more on my talents and mistaking that for grit. It was almost like the conversation that I had with my GM when he told me that you haven't arrived. And I think that during that, it was probably 2.5 years where I thought that I had arrived. So I would say that 2.5 years cost me a lot. So it's not necessarily me losing something in a physical form or in a monetary way. It's just all that I could have learned, acquired, and just built inside of myself. One thing that
But at least you recognized it.
Oh, it took me a while.
Right, but I'm just saying, there's a lot of people here that it takes a lifetime, and then they look back and there's really not a lot of life left. You know what I mean? So I'm glad that it only took 2.5 years.
Yeah.
Granted, it'd be nice if it only took 2.5 days, right? But life's a constant, you know.
See, I thought that I had all of these properties and making this money, and then I had to take a second to look around and thinking like, man, there's some people in my life that I can touch that are still struggling. And I was like, so there's gotta be something more that I can do. Something I always tell myself, you know how you said you felt like you weren't gritty enough and it cost you something or you lost something. One thing that we gotta remind ourselves every day is to tell myself that I'm willing to become the person that I want to be.
Yeah, amen.
I'm willing to go through like whatever it takes. I'm willing to study to be that person.
That's right.
To exercise like that person. So when you can adopt that mentality and be like, yo, I'm gonna do whatever it takes to become that person.
That's right.
And when you can think like that,
that's right.
What's gonna stop you?
That's right. And not only am I willing to do that, but I can do that. And by doing that, I will be different and I will make a difference. You know, as part of that grit mentality is, you know, because I think there's a lot of people that have this like ceiling that they think that even if I studied, even if I did this, the deck is stacked against me. And what I would say is, yeah, that you might have a more challenging time than somebody else, but like, man, you can still do it. Would you agree?
It's like what Einstein said. Einstein said that I'm not the smartest, I just stick with problems longer.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, how beautiful is that?
And so for some of us guys, we just have to.
You have a choice.
Yeah, right? Because, I mean, I remember I gave, in college, we had to take calculus in order to get into the business school. So I got a C-, and my professor told me that, and I go, oh my gosh, can I give you a hug? And he thought I was being, like, facetious. I was like, I'm so thankful. Because I was like, I'm out of here. Like, I'm in business school now. And my dad encouraged me, though, because he said, Brandt, do you know what they call the person that graduates last in their medical school?
What?
I said, I don't know. He goes, doctor.
Exactly.
That's a great point, though, right? When's the last time you've been to the doctor? You said, what's your GPA?
Exactly.
Doesn't matter, man. Get in, get the job done, and get out, and do what it takes.
Society makes it like that. I want to tell you a quick story.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say any names or anything, but it helped me to come up with this philosophy inside of my mind. So my son has this friend in our neighborhood, and I kind of was like irritated with him, you know? And I think that it was an extension of his parents parenting him. So one day the kid comes over and he's like, hey, can you fix my bike? Because his chain's off. And I'm so caught up in my thoughts. This was during that 2.5 year process. I'm so caught up in my thoughts, and I'm like, I don't have time to fix your bike. Can you take it to your dad real quick? So he takes it over to his dad, and I hear a banging from my back door, like bang, bang, bang. And I come outside, and the kid's dad is beating on the bike with a hammer. Now think about this. There's no mechanism on the bike that requires a hammer, is it?
Not that I know of, but you know.
No, I mean you're talking about wrenches, screwdriver.
Yeah, whatever.
Exactly. So it got.
In my case, Scheller's Fitness phone. You know?
Oh man.
Yeah.
That's funny. So I got to thinking. I was like, man, he is banging on that kid's bike, and he's probably going to end up breaking it. So I yell over to him. I'm like, hey, bring me the bike. I'll fix it. So I fix it. All it required for me to put the chain on and pull it back with the socket, 10 millimeter, right? And I got to thinking about that and thinking about the kid and how he was an extension of his parents. So the only reason that he was beating on the bike with a hammer was because that's the only tool that he had.
Yeah, and he didn't know any better.
Right. So somebody else, their tool may be a gun. Their tool may be drugs. So you got to think, and this is good for kids too, you want to be able to put as many tools in your toolbox.
Oh, absolutely.
So that whenever you have that issue, you can be like, oh, I got a wrench for this.
Yeah.
I got a hammer for this.
Right.
Oh, I'll put a nail here.
Yeah. Well, because, you know, for instance, even with that bike story, like, did the hammer accomplish the goal?
No.
Right? So, you know, ultimately we have to make sure that we're using the right tool for the right job. So my little 8-year-old loves to tinker, right? And, you know, so he says, well, Dad, is this a good tool? And I always tell him, depends on what the job is. Right? So, yeah, and just like when you said, you know, you want to touch other people, you know, I think sometimes too, the easy thing to do is just to fix or to give. But the real challenge is to transfer knowledge, right? Because at the end of the day, like, I want my kids to be able to go and teach and do, right? So, you know, make sure that they not only have the end result, but the actual tool to get there, if that makes sense.
Name something that you gained due to being greedy.
Oh, I hate to say this, but money. Yeah, I mean, you know what I mean? It's you know,
it's not a bad thing, though.
No, I know, but I mean, you know, I don't want to be like, hey, you know, but yeah, absolutely. You know, for instance, my dad, like, let me give you a prime example. I told you he's one of the hardest working men I know, right? But he worked at the same oil refinery for, I'll say, 30 years. And eventually until he became disabled because he had a bad back from walking on the concrete all those years. And I'll never forget, like, he had some buddies at the refinery that also owned rental properties. And when I was a young guy, like 12 or 13, I'd say to Dad, Dad, why don't you buy some rental properties? And he goes, oh man, I don't want to do that because toilets break and people call you in the middle of the night and you have to collect rent and this and that. Well, but by me observing that, I also thought, well, what's the alternative? I mean, taking a phone call at 2 in the morning might be easier because you're working at 2 in the morning anyways. You might as well answer the phone, right? And deal with the, like, I think Grant Cardone says, tenants, termites, and liability or something like that. But yeah, for sure, you know, getting 1 or 2 under my belt and then going like, this isn't as bad as I thought, and having the processes in place, and now really looking forward to the next year or two to scaling from where I'm at now to much larger would be my goal. But yeah, just being willing to take educated guesses and educated chances. You know, I'm not saying to go out here and, you know, play, like, be beyond your skis. You know, like, I don't know about you, but like, we started with 1 or 2 properties and kind of figured out what we were doing, made some mistakes, and then we quickly added 4 or 5. And we're like, oh, okay, this is pretty good. And then added 4 or 5. You know, we didn't go out on day 1 and say, we want to get in the rental property business and buy a package of 15 homes.
Right.
Probably wouldn't have been a good idea.
Exactly. You seem to be deep in your career. How did you get involved into insurance?
Yeah, so my uncle was a State Farm agent in Ohio. And you know what? And this isn't bad about State Farm at all, but this is a good grit story. So he was a really good agent in Ohio, and I interned for State Farm during college for a summer, had a great experience. They're a great company, you know, have positive things to say about them. But then I went to work for a couple other companies because I wasn't sure I wanted to be an insurance agent.
Mm-hmm.
And then at some point in my career, I thought, man, being an insurance agent kind of makes sense for multiple reasons. So I applied with State Farm. And before they would even interview me, I had to take a personality profile. And I took the personality profile and I failed. And again, not anything good or bad about them, but they simply said, we don't think you'll be a good insurance agent. So part of that grit could have been, I could have put my head down and felt dejected and said, I guess since they told me I'm not going to be a good insurance agent, I won't be a good insurance agent.
Right.
But I knew better, right? And again, what do I have to lose, right? I mean,
Coming from nothing.
yeah, So anyways, the Lord moved and I had an opportunity with Nationwide, and we took over the book in January of 2013, and in that time we've almost doubled. And so I went from not being a guy who could ever sell an insurance agency or sell insurance to a guy who owns an agency and sold enough that we doubled. And now in July 1st of 2020, we're going to be independent to where Nationwide will still be my preferred carrier, but I'll be able to sell other lines as well, like other carriers for home and auto and life insurance. So honestly, Eric, I really mean this. I'm very thankful. I've made a lot of mistakes in my life, and I've learned a lot, and I've been humbled by those experiences. And I've got some people like yourself and others around me that are encouraging me to always be better in all these different areas. 39 years old. Next year I'll be 40.
39 years young.
Yeah, there you go. But I really do feel that way.
Mm-hmm.
I can honestly tell you that I'm living my best right now. I'm just now hitting my stride where, the mental toughness and grit is catching up with the good habits.
Mm-hmm.
And then the grit has kind of been worn off in certain areas, so where I'm not too edgy. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Trust me, I know
yeah, you know what I mean? Like, like even you said at work, like trying to be set apart, but not like distant.
Right.
So like, how can you be in the world but not of the world? So how can you be around people, but instead of allowing that influence to influence you, how can you still be there and you might be the only one, but you're influencing them?
Right.
So just very thankful.
What else? What else do you do on top of insurance and real estate, of course?
Yeah, so it's interesting you say that because right before I started, I had lunch, and honestly, other than church, spending time with my wife and my boys and working, I don't do much. And but I don't really care to either because man, they are my world. And so like a couple weeks ago, they went out of town. Like my wife was in Denver. One son was at one grandparent's, and the other son was at the other grandparent's. And I had 8 hours to myself, and I just thought, wow, like I don't even know what to do. Like, you know what I mean? I am starting to work out a little bit more because again, that's one area where I haven't been extremely gritty is the discipline of working out, being nutritious. And I found that in a large part, it's based on your inspiration and others, that it's hard to be successful in all areas if one of your areas, like if you have 4 healthy tires, you're great. And if you have 1 bad tire, you can say, well, I've got 3 good tires, but man, your car's not going to go anywhere if you've got 1 bad tire. And so, to handle stress and anxiety and to be able to live in faith and take chances, you just can't stay up till all hours in the morning, put junk in your body, put junk in your mind, and then wonder why you're not optimal. So
good word, optimal.
Yeah, so drinking a lot more water, trying to eat a lot more lean meat and vegetables, staying away from processed junk foods, and so I'm getting my nutrition there, but really feeling the freedom to carve out time to get to the weight room to lift some weights. It's amazing how that, like just the release of endorphins and anxiety and junk allows me to
recharge.
Yeah.
That's what I did last night. I ran 3 miles last night.
Did you really?
I woke up a little tough though. I was like, oh, help me.
Yeah.
But I felt good. It kind of helps me think.
Yeah, right.
Whenever I run.
Clarity.
What does community service mean to you?
Yeah. Well, so I guess we haven't mentioned this, but I'm the mayor of a little city called St. Regis Park. So what community service to me means being involved where you're at. You know what I mean? Like at my kid's school, I actually was on the PTO last year. So, and I was actually they asked for what they call a room mom that kind of organizes things.
Yeah.
But they couldn't find a room mom that was doing it, was able to do it, so I did it. So they had to change it to room parents. You know what I mean? Because they didn't want to send out an email that said to all room moms, so they said to all room parents. I think that's all I'm saying is just being where you're at. You know, like being where your feet are. You know, a lot of times we have to think on this like grand scale of like, what can I do to impact Washington or overseas or Central America or all this stuff. But, you know, what are you doing in the four walls of your house? You know, what are you doing in the mile radius from your home? Are you fixing a bike? You know, we have a couple kids that live down the street that their father doesn't live at home, and those kids are in our house at least a couple times a month having dinner with us, and I'm glad of that. Like I want that. You know what I mean? So community service to me is not like always even. I don't want to be recognized, to be honest with you. I hate the spotlight. How many times do you have to ask me to do this because I do want to do it? But just being where you're at, loving people. In fact, God says, love me with your entire heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. And so that's the community, is loving and serving your neighbors. And your neighbor isn't just the person right next to you, but, you know, helping people the best you can.
Right. So you have kids, and
Yeah, two
boys, right?
Yeah, Brandt, Stephen, and Benjamin. Yeah, Brandt Stevens obviously named after me. Goes by a couple names.
Nice. I actually have two middle names. So.
You do?
Yeah.
All right.
What are you doing to teach them? Because that's tough.
Yeah.
To be able to teach a kid. How do you teach them?
Yeah. So, great point. I try and put them in situations where they're not always going to find instant success. So that like cocoon type deal. So Brandt Stevens,
Instant success.
yeah, he wrestles, and you know, on the wrestling mat, you can't say, well, Johnny missed the ball at first base or Sam struck out. I'm like, bro, there's only one person on that mat that lost today. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And then he also rides gas-powered dirt bikes. And, like, you know, we were up in northern Indiana at one of my best friend's house this weekend, and he was on a four-wheeler and a couple dirt bikes, and on the dirt bike, he crashed a couple times. But, you know, that's not the end of the world. That's a great lesson.
Right.
Because we all crash.
Mm-hmm.
Get up and ride again. But I just tell my wife, I'm okay with stitches and broken bones, but I want to stay away from death, right? So, you know, allowing our kids to fail and to be in school, and like if he gets in trouble at school, like not say, don't get on the teacher, ask the teacher how I can help, you know, and know that like he probably does need discipline and correction and encouragement. And if, you know, he has a friend at school that has a problem and he have a problem relationally, you know, I don't just come home and say, well, that kid did this and that. Hey, you know, what are you doing that could, how could you be a better friend? How can you help this situation? You know, Benjamin, he's 5.5, and he's not, it's a little bit harder to teach him grit because he's still 5.5 and he's not necessarily like in kindergarten yet, or he's not in like a lot of sports teams. So it's a little bit harder with him, but I'm sure I'll figure some things out.
And he'll learn from the habits.
I mean, that's the hope.
Out of all of your responsibilities, what's your favorite responsibility?
Being a dad. Yeah, and I'm really not just saying that.
That's
I mean,
too.
like at the end of the day, I really mean this, man. Rental property is great, insurance is great, whatever. But that's just what I do. I mean, I could go work at Ford or UPS or mow lawns, just as long as I get to go home. And I'm really not just saying this either. Being a daddy and a husband, right? When I get to go home to those three individuals, we play a board game called Sorry on Sunday nights. It's fun. It's really fun. But it's really fun with those three. Especially teaches patience. Well, that's how I teach grit to Benjamin. We play a board game. So like he gets excited and stand up. No, sir, you have to sit down. Or if he loses and goes back to home base, hey, we don't throw pieces. we wait our turn, and we get back on the horse and do it again.
Yep.
And we always shake hands beforehand and say good luck. And after a game, no matter who wins, we say good game.
Mhm.
So that's a little way to teach them grit. But being a daddy and being a husband, I'm just extremely blessed. And yeah. And the thing is too, I think of it this way: like my oldest son is 8.
Mhm.
If I do my job right and he leaves when he's 18, I only got 10 more years with him. So I mean, I'm almost halfway there, right? I mean,
So-
first quarter's over for sure.
Yeah.
We've got about 3 or 4 minutes left in the second quarter, and we're about to go into halftime here.
Mhm.
You know, so like in my theory, I'm 39 years young, right? If you said, Brandt, how long is your working life? Like, A, I'm never gonna retire because I like working.
Mhm.
But let's just say I work till I'm 70.
Mhm.
I mean, I've got, what, 30 years to work? Well, I've got 10 years to be a dad with him. Because they say, let me say this real quick, they say that by the time a kid is 18 and they leave home, you will have spent 95% of the time that you're going to spend with him by that point.
Hmm.
So my point is this, I'm not going to jeopardize any time with my kids because I'm getting a chunk of it, 95% of it right now. And then 10 years, I've only got 5% left with them. Whereas, man, I can work for another 30 years. Like, so what?
I think that kind of depends on the upbringing too,
Absolutely.
because I see a lot of parents, well, perfect example, the kid that I was telling you that was working since he was 5, and they have kind of like a tradition where they always get together. And if you're a good parent, your kid's gonna be calling you all the time, almost trying to gauge every decision or what I should do next and filtering things through you. I mean, I talk to my mom, I used to a lot, and she calls herself a soundboard, bouncing an idea off of her or a thought. So if you're a good parent, I don't think that that'll ever fade down to that 5% left.
Yeah, and I mean, it may not, but I mean, I guess what I'm saying is that's not even a bad thing as
Mhm.
much as it is like, hey, I'm fully aware that when my son's got a 40 or 50 hour week job and a spouse and 2 kids,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I mean, I'm not gonna be at the dinner table with him every night. I'm not gonna be at a wrestling practice with him 3 nights a week. I'm not gonna have Saturdays and Sundays undivided with him. That's what I mean. But yeah, and so that's one thing where I didn't get that from my dad, right? Is because he did have that grit and worked all the time, but because he didn't have certain grit to take chances on like rental properties or other things, I had a lot of time I missed out with my dad. And so I think that's one reason I'm so highly invested time-wise with my kids, and that even almost propels me to take opportunities in faith, because I don't want to jeopardize time with them just due to return on investment of my time. You know what I mean? I need money to make money so I can have time with them, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But, you know, be encouraged, anybody who's listening, that, you know, sometimes it's not like, it's just what we talked about. Sometimes it's not even if you don't have it, it's easier to get it. Because I remember growing up thinking, man, if my kid has a sporting event, I'm not going to miss it. If it's Christmas Eve, heck, even here at the office, we close on the day before Christmas Eve and Christmas Eve and Christmas and the day after, or something like that. Because people are like, are you sure? I'm like, bro, we work so we can live. We don't live so we can work. Like, go be with your families.
Love it. What's next for you?
Yeah, so in general,
Mm-hmm. You got the insurance company you're building, a real estate portfolio.
So that's a great question, and I'd like to tell you I know the answer. What I need to do is continue to grow grit in myself. And Albert Tate was a visiting pastor here at our church the last couple weeks, and he encouraged us all to pray big prayers, and the prayers not just be about ourselves and like our little to-do list. So part of what's next for me is sitting still. You mentioned stillness.
Reading this book called Stillness.
Stillness and saying, God, what do you have next for me? Not what does Brandt Davis have for Brandt Davis, but what does God have for me? And so I can be obedient to that. I assume which isn't always safe, that the vehicle of insurance agency and rental properties and portfolio will help that. But my God is a mighty God, and sometimes He says, if you want to be a fisherman, you leave those fishing nets and those boats and you come follow me. Am I willing to do that? Absolutely. Yeah, if He said, man, sell the agency, sell the real estate, and I've got something totally different for you, so be it. Let's go have fun. I'm not saying that's the case, but if
Call
that,
me.
Yeah, I will
The real
call
estate.
you. Yeah, I will call you. But sitting here as just me on October 21st, guessing at what I would like to do, I'd like to grow the insurance agency some more. I talked to a potential producer today at lunch that might come on board next year. I've got a gentleman that's at P&C class right now. He speaks Spanish fluently, and so that would be a great asset for he and I to work together. So I'd like to grow that, especially as we grow independent. And then at a minimum, over the next, I'll say 3 years, I'd like to get to 100 doors. So the next big thing on my docket is, here's insurance and I want to grow it. Okay. Here's real estate and I want to grow it. So like, always got to be in growth mode in all areas, but super focused growth mode on real estate. And the best way to get to those 100 doors is I could see myself and maybe 1 or 2 business partners, if I don't do it by myself, buying a 90 to 100 unit complex. And I was in Los Angeles a couple months ago learning. I think that's another part of grit, is realizing you always got to be learning, and that you really
always
have never reached your potential. There's always more to do, more to learn, and more humility needed. And then so next month in November, I'm going to be in Plano, Texas, learning from a gentleman about multifamily. And I really think that, so here's this guy from Lime, Ohio, who's worked hard his whole life and had done decent, and then insurance came involved, and it really kind of took me to a level I hadn't thought of or whatever. And then with the insurance now becoming a broker, and then with real estate, I think I really don't even know what to say. I'm just so thoroughly excited about the future.
That's an awesome feeling, isn't it?
Yeah, but let me say this, not just for me and my family, but for others. I mean, I've had a lot of people here pour into me in life. A lot of people. And with encouragement, time. It's not always been money. Some have poured into me with money. But I owe a lot of people a lot of my success. And I look forward to making sure that other people are thanked appropriately.
That's definitely how I feel. Speaking my story, I'm more excited about the future.
Yeah.
For the people that I love more than for myself.
Yeah. Like, I know you like watches, but you get them from your dealership.
Right.
But like, I don't wear a nice watch. Like I have a 03 Accord with 180,000 miles, and a 2011 Odyssey with 171,000 miles. Like, I'm not gonna go buy a Mercedes or something, but like, man, there's people in my life that like could use a little bit of TLC, and they're gonna get it. In fact, when we leave here, I won't even say their name, but I'm gonna call somebody today. My wife and I, it's on our heart that they join us for a trip, all expenses paid. So
That's awesome.
They don't know it yet, but all they gotta do is pay the gas to get there. Other than that,
That's a blessing.
yeah. But why not, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
those are the things that make you feel more rewarded.
Yeah, amen.
Than anything.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you could go buy a fast car, man. That wears off so quick.
That's right. Well, in college, we talked about marginal utility.
Marginal utility.
Yeah, right. So like for each thing you get, it diminishes in value.
Yep.
So for instance, if you said right now, Brandt, do you want a Snickers bar?
Mm-hmm.
I'd probably say no because I'm trying to be good, but I'd say yeah, sure, that sounds good, right? I eat one. You say, do you want a second one? I'd be like, oh, okay. I eat a second one. A second one doesn't taste nearly as good as the first.
Because it goes from like a 10, I think it goes from like a 10 to a 6.
Yeah, okay. But then imagine a third one. Then it's like
0.
Oh, bro, I don't even want this. This is starting to taste bad in my mouth. So that's where I would say is that I'm so with you, so excited about the future, because at this point, it's really about building up my employees or the people I work with. You know, we're a team, helping them, make sure my kids are on solid footing, friends and loved ones. There's some churches that I really like and support and want to help them get their goals accomplished. So that's where we're at.
When the credits roll, the movie's all complete, curtains close, what do you want to be known for?
A guy who loved Jesus well, and loved my family well, and you know, left the world a better spot. You know, a giver more than a taker.
Love it.
You know.
I appreciate you being on the show.
My pleasure, man.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Hey, so listen, if you haven't already, you definitely need to go check out this book. And per our conversation, you should understand that grit is not genetic.
Yeah, amen. Thankfully.
Right.
I would have been out. Yeah.
Grit can be developed. Thanks for watching.
See you guys.